Welcome to the Wake Up America show. I am your host, Austin Petersen. I'm so glad and thankful to have you here. People like Byron Norris, Kermode Bear, CF30, Thormock. What would we be without you? What would we be without Paul Southcott from the Isle of Alderney? Where would we be without Murtek or BB for Liberty or any of our other live friends like Joni Rankin hanging out here in the chat? Hi, Joni. Hi, Cutie Pie. Good morning. Hi, guys. I'm so glad that you guys are here. We're going to have a fantastic show today. It's already been a full day. I don't know if you guys saw, I was on Fox News this morning for the second time in like 2 weeks. Doing a little reaction to the Donald Trump speech. It's all fine. It's all good. I did a little 3-minute segment. Those kinds of things, man, they are just, so valuable to the For Liberty Network, the growth of the For Liberty Network. Appreciate what you guys do for us out there. Make sure that you tell Fox and Friends first how grateful we are that you had old AP for Liberty on. Make sure you tag them on X. Tag Todd Pirro, tag Carly Shimkus. Let him know. We appreciate you. Well, Donald Trump gave a fantastic speech over the weekend, but it kind of reminded me of a speech from way back before I was born, back in 1964. And maybe you guys will remember it if some of you were around then. I'm betting most of you were not alive during this famous speech, but it reminded me of one of my favorite speeches of all time from a president someone that should have been president of the United States. Take a listen.
Central candidate Austin Petersen joins me now. Austin, thank you so much for joining us. So the president is talking about the rise of socialism. He says it's synonymous with communism. During his speech celebrating American values, remarkable that he has to do that. Are you as concerned about this rise in socialism as he is?
Absolutely. Good morning, Carly. Good morning, Todd. Thanks for having me. That was one of the great American speeches of my lifetime. It actually reminded me of another famous Republican speech. Some of your viewers remember 1964 San Francisco at the Cow Palace when Barry Goldwater looked out of the convention and said, "Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice." And the story goes, Carly, that this stunned reporter in the hall turned to the man next to him and said, "Oh my God, he's going to run as Goldwater." So in other words, there was no tack into the mushy middle. This was pure Trump at his best. He wasn't reading the polls. He was telling you exactly what he believes. And honestly, this kind of anti-communist rhetoric, this is the kind of stuff the voters in small towns like Jefferson City, Missouri want to hear, Carly.
Yeah.
Is it, guys? Is it? Huh? Anybody remember that old famous speech? Was anybody here alive in 1964 during that famous speech? Anybody any of the old heads here? Any okay boomers? Let us know.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue.
Yeah, best president that never was. It was over 100 degrees on the National Mall, the hottest 4th of July that Washington has ever recorded. Grown men were wilting into the grass. The National Guard was handing out water bottles like communion wafers. A thunderstorm chased half the crowd into the Smithsonian. We had a huge storm here as well. Stephanie and I went down to the Lake of the Ozarks for the 4th of July. We took Hazel. There's this little bar called The Cave, and we had never been to it. We wanted to explore it. Apparently it had like a pool that goes halfway into the cave. It turns out that choosing to go to the cave was the best place at the Lake of the Ozarks because we had a huge storm. It felt like a hurricane. So I grabbed Stephanie, we grabbed Hazel, and we went deep into the cave as the hurricane on the Lake of the Ozarks blew by. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, we got to get out of here, man. But all was well, all was okay. If we were going to pick anywhere to be in the storm at the Lake of the Ozarks, then the cave was the right place to be. But back half a country away, the thunderstorm happened as well over the 4th of July. And I love that Donald Trump didn't cancel it. The ordinary presidents that had come before him might have been like, oh, well, for safety, we don't want to have the crowds out here. But President Trump didn't give a rip about safety. That's what I love about the new Republican Party, like full steam ahead. Yeah, it's like the Republican Party today is like Lieutenant Dan. in the storm. Hold on. Lieutenant Dan Storm Forrest is like, you'll never take this boat. Woo-hoo!
Now me, I was scared, but Lieutenant Dan, he was mad.
Come on! You call this a storm? Oh, you son of a bitch! Oh! It's time for a showdown! You and me! I'm right here! Come and get me!
That's the new GOP, ladies and gentlemen, like it or not. So, yeah, the other half of the crowd was standing in a puddle of their own sweat. They refused to leave. And then, well past his bedtime and way past the schedule, the president walked out under more than 850,000 fireworks going on. Yeah, this is true. I've been up for like 4 or 5 hours now, guys, so I'm already jazzed. And Trump, he looked out at this sweaty, sunburned, magnificent mob, and he says, nobody can be like us. And you know what? He's right. Because only in America do you celebrate your 250th birthday by nearly giving the entire Capitol heat stroke. You set off enough gunpowder to trigger an air quality advisory, and you drop $16 million fixing a reflecting pool. Good morning, America. You're 250 years old. You look a little rough, but I've never loved you anymore. Little winds, got a little wind burn there on you guys. So, but here's the thing that the rest of the world has never quite understood about us. We're not really just a nation. We're also an argument that refuses to end, because 2.5 centuries in, we're still fighting about every single last thing. Because the president was up there warning about the communists. The largest city in the country was being run by an actual card-carrying socialist who wants to freeze your rent and tax you straight into the Hudson. But meanwhile, some good news is that while American engineers were quietly bringing new nuclear reactors to life for the first time in 40 years, half of everybody under 30 years old was moving back into their childhood bedroom and tearing the old Twilight posters off the wall. And the vice president picked this week to announce that the party of Ronald Reagan is now more Alexander Hamilton than Milton Friedman, which is a really fancy way of starting a bar fight at a libertarian convention. And that, my friends, is exactly what we are wading into this morning. Jon Miltimore at 8 a.m. We're going to talk about all the young people moving back in with their parents. And we're going to talk to economist Dan Mitchell about the JD Vance, the JD Vance comments on Friedman and Alexander Hamilton. So I'm Steffi Petersen, guys. This is the Wake Up America show. Coffee is hot. The Republic is still standing after 200 years. This is Wake Up America. Wake up, America, go home. Wake up, America, show home.
And it belongs to us all. It belongs to our newest Americans, those standing here with me today, all of whom were recently naturalized. You each hold a special power, the power to determine what America means. The powerful have always known their answer. America, in their view, is an arena of supremacy, where only a select few are allowed freedom, where not all are created equal. America, if you ask them, becomes less the more people it welcomes. America, they will tell you, belongs only to those with the right accent or the right shade of skin. The rest of us, they insist, should be grateful for merely being allowed to visit.
Yeah, well, you should be grateful for being allowed to visit. I think it's time that you, clearly showing you've overstayed your welcome, need to go home. Dash over on YouTube. How you doing, Dash? Welcome to the show. That was Zohran Mamdani's July 4th speech. We'll get into that a little bit more. Donald Trump's speech, though, I don't think that his speech could have been given by any Republican in the last 30 years. Close your eyes, guys, and try and imagine Mitt Romney giving a speech like that.
The Constitution, above all, it's the enemy of July 4th, 1776. It is the enemy indeed. Even while the radicals and extremists attack our incredible history at every turn, They are silent on the miserable history of communism itself because it never worked. Thousands of years, if you look at it, under different names, under somewhat different ideologies and systems, that system has led to more death and destruction than any system ever tried. It killed 100 million people just in the last century alone. Communism is the exact
Let me ask you a question. Can you picture John Kasich giving a speech like that? Be honest. You think that Mitt Romney or the old guard of the Republican Party would have said something like that on America's 250th birthday, looking into the camera, telling us the truth? Communism is a mortal threat, and you cannot be loyal to Karl Marx and loyal to America at the same time. You cannot picture that, because that is not who they ever were. That is not what the old Republican Party was. For a whole generation, the Republican establishment has just handed the base a parade of managers and accountants, men who wanted to trim one line off a budget here, right, and then lose an election with dignity. When what the Republican base wanted all along was someone who believed what Trump is saying and had the courage to say it, that someone who was a fighter. And this is the entire secret of Donald Trump, is that he is not dragging the party away from its own people. Trump is the first man in decades who actually sounds like them. This is the kind of speech that you would expect to hear at a local Cole County Republican club meeting. This is the kind of speech that people who live in Jefferson City, Missouri, where I am from, this is the kind of stuff that we want to hear. This is not the kind of stuff that you hear if you go to the national conferences on the right, if you go to the national right-wing conferences. Maybe at a Turning Point USA conference, you would hear a speech like this. You would not hear them in the sort of, especially not, and I've been going to these conferences, guys, for 2 decades now. I've been going to all these major right-wing events, and that is not how the Republicans used to sound. That's why I used to be a member of the Libertarian Party. But this is my home. This is my political party now. Not just out of expediency, but because that rhetoric and that language, that is what I believe in. That is what I stand for. Let's hear you guys in the comments in the crowd. I got to hear from you this morning. I mean, just drop an American flag if you're with me on this one. If you are like me and you hear these words from the president and you say, you know what, I'm probably a little bit more radical than President Trump, even on certain things. Maybe I'm a little, I don't know, more pro-life or a little bit more pro-free market, et cetera, whatever. But this is these are my people. This is what I want to hear from my leaders. Yeah, drop those American flags in the chat. I want to see them. I want to feel the energy from you guys this morning. Time for us to wake up, America. Because think about this. I've seen so many people who, so polarized in the last decade since Donald Trump came in, and some of them have gone left. They've gone left, and you could almost understand if you try and put yourself in another person's shoes. Okay, well, why would they go? These former libertarians, why would they go to the Democratic Party? Why would these never Trump neocons? Why would they go to the Democratic Party? And even when you try and give the devil his due, when you try and put yourself in their shoes, it still doesn't make sense. Here is why. Because if you cannot, Trump says you cannot be a patriot and a communist. True. I don't think you can even say that you could be a patriot and a Democrat. This is not just partisan puffery, guys. Let me explain to you why I believe this. Okay? Because there is a patriotism gap between the Republicans and the Democrats that proves my point, okay? This is the data on the field. Gallup clocked it, all right? Only 27% of Democrats say they're extremely or very proud to be an American. This is the lowest in the 25 years that they have, since they've started polling on this, 25 years, this is the lowest that it has been in 25 years. So here's the thing. The Democrats are only patriotic when their party is in power. So their patriotism is dependent on whether or not they actually control the country. But that is not the same thing. Republicans are at 93 right now. I mean, Politico ran a piece on this, admitting Democrats are grappling uncomfortably with the World Cup being a massive success on American soil under Trump. This Democratic strategist that they interviewed for this Politico piece confessed to the liberal wish casting. They wanted the World Cup to be a disaster. They're rooting for America to lose. How can you be a patriotic Democrat? There's no such thing as it's not your grandpa's Democratic Party anymore. How can you possibly be, if you love America, how can you possibly be a Democrat? You can't. You cannot hold those two things at one time. You just can't.
Overall, have an extreme, again, 56% overall have an extremely or very much proud of the country. It's 29% among Democrats. It's 90% among Republicans. Look at that staggering gap between the parties. Look at it on the other end here. Only a little or not proud at all. It's 36% among Democrats. That number among Democrats, it's higher on the low end there than it is on the extremely proud end, and it's only 3% for Republicans. So a massive partisan divide on that question of being proud to be an American. Again, 56% overall.
So, 4.5 million fans coming here for the World Cup. The stadiums are sold out. And the Democrats, they're rooting for disaster. They're rooting for us to lose. And that's not true for Republicans when Democrats are in power. The Republicans don't root for America to lose when the Democrats control the government. And this pro-America coalition, this is building. Elon Musk said this weekend, people who are disloyal and don't love this country should be exiled immediately. We are radicalizing Elon Musk so much. Did you guys see the Spencer Pratt video? I think I've got it. I'm afraid of pulling it up because I think he says naughty words in it. Is everybody okay if I play a little bit of Spencer Pratt if he says a bad word? Are you guys going to be mad? Please don't leave. Just turn down the volume real quick. I'm warning you to just turn down the volume for like 1 minute and then you can turn it back up if you got little ones. I love it when you bring your kids to the show. I want to play this Spencer Pratt clip because it's so good. It's got a naughty word in it, and I don't want you guys to be mad at me because your kid heard a naughty word. Okay, so just turn it down, and here we go.
We all had to sit and watch that vile commie mayor sit on the wrong side of our founding fathers' desks to try and lecture us about our own history. Notice how the communist always attacks your history. The communist must attack your history. Why? Because history is what anchors you. It's what makes us attached to something. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. History breeds an almost irrational attachment to things, an attachment that is more powerful than anyone can imagine. Erasing history is how you demoralize people, how you unmoor them and detach them from their society so you can take it from them and rewrite it in your image. Think of your country like a home. What makes your home special? It's not the marble countertops or the expensive furniture or the fancy appliances. It's the memories you have there. That backyard is where we got married. That living room rug is where our son took his first step. Hey, don't touch that. That was his first teddy bear. It doesn't matter how torn and tattered that thing is. You will never get rid of it. And you will fight anyone who tries to take it away. Why? Because you have history with it. You ever buy a new home? Remember those first few months? Even the first few years there, it doesn't feel like home. It could be 1,000,000 times nicer than the crappy apartment you came from, but it doesn't feel like home for a long time because you don't have history there. It's easy to knock down some walls, change the floor plan. If you have no memories to attach you to it, it's just wood and drywall. Who cares? Get rid of it. Memories make it a home, even the bad ones. Hey, remember when Dad hit his head on the rafter in the attic and we spent all night in the ER? That's the avocado tree I fell out of and broke my first bone. Isn't it weird how even the bad memories make us cherish a place?
I love it. That's my party. That's my party. I'm in Spencer Pratt's political party. I'm in the Donald Trump, Spencer Pratt, anti-communist. I'm in the anti-socialist social club. We need to get that shirt in the gift shop. Brad, we're gonna get that in the gift shop there before the end of the show, so you guys can buy it. As by the way, we do have bonus content today. So if you want to unlock the bonus content, do what Byron Norris has done. Head over to forlibertyshop.com. Make a purchase this morning. I highly recommend. Since we're all Nixon maxing this year, I highly recommend that you guys visit forlibertyshop.com and get the Nixon Ringer tee. And Brad will have the anti-socialist social club in there as well. So, and Stephanie, I think, just made a new funny shirt. I think it was Brad's idea, but Stephanie got it up in the shop this morning for us. It's not a party until my wiener comes out. Thanks, guys. Head on over to forlibertyshop.com, guys. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. Every purchase that you make during the live show helps to unlock that bonus content. Get the Richard Nixon Ringer tee and the It's Not a Party Until My Wiener Comes Out tee. Remember, if you use the code BUY2, get 15, you'll save 15% on your purchase. Thanks so much for supporting the Grift Shop. And again, if we hit $100 raised during the live show in Rumble Rants or in purchases, then you'll unlock our mini documentary. And Brad's getting the anti-socialist social club up on the shop. So this is what...
Opposite of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's death, tyranny, and the pursuit of evil. The godless communist morality states that anything is justified to bring about inhuman visions and to really propose what's good. They don't want good. They don't love God, and they don't want God. They don't love religion, and they don't want religion, and they won't have it. But we will not let them win. They have no chance.
Yeah, that's my president. This is my party. Yeah, that's what I stand for. So he's the first man in decades who actually sounds like what the Republicans say that they believe in. The Republican Party has never been more reflective of its own base than it was this weekend, because the president understands the one thing that the consultants who ruled the Republican Party all these years before, he understands something that they don't, and that is that the base of the Republican Party wants to fight. They want to fight the enemies of the United States. They want to fight those enemies, foreign and domestic. And on Saturday night, he named the domestic enemies out loud in front of the whole country. So let's meet them. The Commie Caucus. We're going to go through this fact by fact. This is the Wake Up America. On the 250th anniversary, Trump drew a line down the middle of American politics, and he basically dared people to pick a side. At Mount Rushmore, he put into words that you cannot misunderstand. You can be loyal to Karl Marx, or you can be loyal to America. You can be a communist, or you can be a patriot, but you cannot be both. But, the names had already won their primaries. The names of the people had already won their primaries. And America has stood at this exact fork before. We have been here before. In 1919, and again in the early 1950s, this country looked hard at the homegrown radical left, and we asked ourselves whether they meant what they said. But the difference between 1919 and the 1950s and the rise of communism is that the radicals are not hiding. If they're hiding, they're only hiding behind the name Democratic Socialist. They are communists, and they are on the ballot, and they are winning. And right now, one of them is sitting in one of the highest offices in the land as the mayor of New York City.
How small they are, how weak, how unoriginal. At every moment in our past, those who led through exclusion and isolation have tried to win power and enrich themselves by turning us against one another. Division is the oldest trick in politics and the cheapest. But time and again, including 250 years ago, those forces of division have been vanquished by the forces of progress. As Thomas Paine once wrote, "This new world hath been the asylum for the persecuted lovers of civil and religious liberty. Hither have they fled." And yet today, too many of our leaders do not believe in a vision of this nation as an asylum for the persecuted, but rather as one that persecutes those seeking asylum. As we mark 250 years, what do we see? We see a city of contradictions within a nation of contradictions. We see the wealthiest country in the history of the world, one where children go to sleep hungry while the world's first trillionaire hungers for more. We see monopolies that dominate every industry and oligarchs who buy elections. We see masked agents terrorizing our streets, eating food cooked by our undocumented neighbors before spiriting them away and unmarked vans. We see a nation
eating food cooked by our. So he's talking about. This is a true story, allegedly. Apparently, ICE agents went to a Mexican food restaurant and they sat down and they had a meal at the Mexican restaurant. And as soon as they were done, they busted the illegals who were running the place, which is just. Now, I don't know if they paid. Did they pay? Did they get the check? And did they pay the check first? I don't know. You'll have to find that one out for me. Zoran Mamdani, 34 years old, sworn in on New Year's Day as the 112th mayor of New York City, is a dues-paying member of the Democratic Socialists of America. He promised at his own inauguration to govern as a Democratic Socialist. And guys, think about the scale of that, because New York City has a bigger budget than most nations on earth, and it's now being run on an ideology that has never once in 100 years of trying delivered the prosperity it promises. This is a man who himself has never created a single job, and he's not a protest candidate shouting from a street corner anymore. He is the face of the Commie Caucus, and he has 8.5 million people for a laboratory now. Now, Mamdani froze the rent on about 1 million apartments by stacking the board that votes on it. His signature promise was a rent freeze, and he got it the way that machine politicians always get what they want. He packed the panel. Mamdani appointed 6 of the 9 members of the Rent Guidelines board, and in June voted 7-1 to freeze the rent. And on roughly 1 million rent-stabilized apartments. It sounds like a gift until you ask who repairs the boiler when the landlord can't cover his costs. So, and it was a Swedish socialist economist by the name of Assar Lindbeck who famously said that rent control is the most efficient technique presently known to destroy a city, except for bombing. So when your own side's economists compare your housing policy to an airstrike, maybe you ought to listen to it. Now, his own critics, of course, Mamdani, would call this a 1-2 wealth destruction punch. So to pay for the free buses and the rest of the communist wish list, Mamdani wants to reach straight into the pockets of anybody who has anything worth taking. The plan, according to Mamdani, is to raise New York's corporate tax rate to 11.5% and then stack an extra 2% income tax on anyone earning over $1 million. And economists have warned it's a 1-2 wealth destruction punch, because when you combine this with a rent freeze, that's going to drive property values into the floor. The flaw in every soak the rich scheme, of course, is that, and as we've been seeing, is that the rich have feet. When France's socialist president Hollande slapped a 75% tax on millionaires, you know what the millionaires in France did? They moved to London and Brussels. And the revenue that they were supposed to get from that tax never materialized. And then France quietly killed the tax 2 years later, because capital doesn't sit still and wait to be confiscated. This isn't a fringe movement anymore. The numbers are not even close. When Mamdani launched his campaign in October of 2024, the National Democratic Socialists of America had about 50,000 members. And by February this year, they have crossed 100,000 members. And the New York City chapter alone ballooned to 14,000 members. They call this the Mamdani effect. And just to understand how stunning this is, you have to remember what the DSA used to be. It was founded in 1982 by Michael Harrington. It spent roughly 35 years as a tiny debate society that you could fit in a college lecture hall. It took them decades to build a base and one viral campaign to double it. Okay. They won 35 primaries this year. They're on track to double their seats in Congress. The winning is not limited to New York, by the way, and this is not a fluke. There is a national ground game, and it's about time that we started putting our own together. The DSA endorsed candidates have already scored victories in 35 primaries this cycle, and the communist bloc in the DNC is on track to roughly double its seats in Congress, from 2 to around 5. Analysts across the spectrum agree that the next Congress will seat more open socialists than any Congress in the entire 250 years of our republic. Okay. They ran roughly 150 candidates. They expected to lose most of them, and they don't care. because this is a long march for them. This is not about a single election, right? And this is the part that so many people on the right are missing out, right? The communists are playing the 20-year game while everybody else is just obsessing over the next news cycle, okay? We have got to build a long game, and that is what we are doing over at the For Liberty Network. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is, the work that we are doing here. If you don't know who I am and you don't know what the For Liberty Network is, but you are galvanized by what I'm saying and you want to be a part of putting together a right-leaning libertarian nationalist coalition in the GOP, that is my project. So here's the best way for us to get in contact, okay? Here is what the best way is to get in contact with us is if you agree with me, if you want to fight this communist scourge, sign my petition. Go to communistcontrolact.com. That's communistcontrolact.com. If you go to communistcontrolact.com, sign the petition, hand over your email address. I will contact you personally and talk to you about the plan that we have to build an actual faction in the Republican Party that will drag the Republican Party even farther to the right. If you guys are agreeing with me and you like what I'm saying, then head over to communistcontrolact.com. Sign our petition to enforce the Communist Control Act of 1954. The Communist Control Act of 1954 was authored and championed by Democratic Senator Hubert Humphrey. He wrote this law because he understood the existential threat that Marxism posed to constitutional government. Today, his own party has proven incapable of suppressing the very forces that he warned against. You can read all of the details there on the petition. You can read the details of the history of the Communist Control Act right here. You can scroll through all of that. Add your name to the declaration, guys. If you give me your phone number, I will call you. I will call you personally on my phone. So I will call you from my personal cell phone and talk to you about it. If you want to help us to boost this, guys, amplify our petition. You can make a one-time donation or join the $17.76 a month club. I promise you, you'll be glad you did because we are using it to build the faction, the counter faction in the Republican Party against the Democratic Socialists. And we will run candidates for office. So if you're not already on board, then head on over to communistcontrolact.com and sign up, guys, because there has never been a better time or an opportunity, I think, right now to stand in the gap and fight against this Democratic Socialist. And, Donald Trump gets so much crap from libertarians. And I have to say that, while there might be some criticisms that are warranted, I've made criticism in the past. How can you look at what he's doing right now with the NATO summit? He's on his way to the NATO summit, meet with Erdogan in Turkey. And what is his message? That Europe needs to step up and pay more for their own defense. Take a listen from the Fox News this morning.
Well, you mentioned Russia, you mentioned NATO, and we thank you for that because those are two topics of conversation that the president is going to be very much focused on this week when he heads to Turkey for the NATO summit. He'll be leaving later tonight. Are you interested in this at all? Tell us what piques your interest about the NATO summit and what you think we should be looking out for.
Yeah, Europe is finally paying for their own neighborhood, Carly. NATO is pledging roughly $80 billion in military aid to Ukraine this year. It's their border. It's their bill. It's not ours. This is the deal that we were always promised. This is what Trump campaigned on. Dwight Eisenhower, the man who built NATO, called our troops there a temporary expedient back in 1951. This was supposed to be a stopgap while Europe rebuilt. Now, 75 years later, Trump is actually the first president with the nerve to actually collect on the bill.
Well, you mentioned...
Who is that handsome son of a bitch? Guys, just saying, man, these Fox News appearances are helping us out. Warlock says he still got all 10 figures all 10 fingers means it was a successful 250th birthday. USA, USA. Glad to have you here, Warlock. Welcome to the show, bud. Appreciate y'all very, very much. All right, so there you go. Like the first president since 1951 to say it's time for Europe to step in and pay. What could be more libertarian than that? What could be more libertarian than that, guys? I don't truck with people who don't get the Trump, like how important the Trump phenomenon is. I'm actually going to be on a panel and Freedom Fest this week. I'm going to Las Vegas, on Wednesday. Here come the hiccups. This might be a good opportunity for me to take a commercial break. Yeah, here they come on hardcore. Anyways, I'm going to be on a panel talking about why Trump is good for liberty in Las Vegas. going up against a panel of libertarians who say the opposite. I'm the only guy, I think, at this point who is going to be able to make the Trump case. They had another guy on there, but he had to cancel for other logistical reasons. But it might just be me versus everybody, which is honestly how I prefer it. I got the hiccups. They're coming on. I'm going to get a drink of water and come back. Don't go away, guys. Go to forlibertyshop.com. Do a little grifting. Go to forlibertyshop.com. Buy some Founding Flavors coffee. The Franklin's Electric Elixir is delicious. Buy a box. Support the counter-revolution on the Wake Up America show and the For Liberty Network. We'll be right back. Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. George Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
Communism is a mortal threat to American liberty. It is the greatest threat to our country, including World War I, World War II, Pearl Harbor, or even 9/11. We're not going to let this happen to us. Believe me, we're not letting it happen. Because communism is the enemy of free people everywhere in the world. Never works. It's the enemy of the Constitution. Above all, it's the enemy of July 4th, 1776. It is the enemy indeed. Even while the radicals and extremists attack our incredible history at every turn, they are silent on the miserable history of communism itself because it never worked. Thousands of years, if you look at it, under different names, under somewhat different ideologies and systems, that system has led to more death and destruction than any system ever tried. It killed 100 million people just in the last century alone. Communism is the exact opposite of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's death, tyranny, and the pursuit of evil. The godless communist morality states that anything is justified to bring about inhuman visions and to really propose what's good.
If I were writing the president's speeches, that's exactly the way that I would have written those speeches. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. Good morning to R. Volt. Glad to have you here, as well as Byron Norris and so many of our other friends tuning in live on Rumble. Make sure you click that like button and share us with your friends. When the president says communist, calls them a communist, the media they say it's a smear, but let's let the DSA speak for itself, because inside the Democratic Socialists of America, guys, are these organized factions with their own names and their platforms. So there is the Marxist Unity Group, which openly calls for achieving communism in the United States and speaks glowingly of the ideology that guided the Soviet Union, and the Red Star Caucus, which describes itself as Marxist-Leninist, and these groups control a real share of the DSA's National Political Council. Marxist-Leninist is not just a vague insult, right? This is the specific doctrine of Lenin and Stalin. Now, I did a debate years ago on Russia Today. I don't even know if it's still on YouTube. Let me just check real quick. Hold on here. Probably should have looked this up before the show, but yeah, I just remember the guy at the very beginning who was like the socialist. It was like a libertarian versus anarchist versus socialist debate. Hold on. See, libertarian, anarchist, communist, socialist debate. It was on Russia Today like a decade or 2 decades ago. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, yeah. So here's the thing. They're going to introduce this. Let me see if I can fast forward to this part where the guy who stands up for socialism explains what his system is. And I remember him saying specifically, and I was like glad that he said it out loud, what he stands for and what his belief system was. Oh God, my hair looks terrible, guys. No. I've always had just terrible hair. I've never had good hair. Oh God. You want me to show this to you? All right. Well, the important part is that the guy.
You have the right to force your belief.
All right. Libertarian. Look at all. Okay, hold on. Here's the guy that I want you to hear where he
So many
explains
people run the opposite direction. One of probably the most misunderstood philosophies currently in this country explains socialism for the audience.
Explain it.
Of course. Well, in a nutshell, socialism is essentially the mirror opposite of capitalism. It's using the massive wealth and great things that we know our society can be created by, and not waiting on a Bill Gates, for example, to solve cancer, but mobilizing the governmental power, the democratic power of people concentrated in a governmental state power to defeat cancer if we know we need to defeat cancer, to build affordable housing if we know we need to build affordable housing, and all these things that as a society we know we have consensus on in terms of a humane standard of living. So socialism ultimately is a means of actualizing a humane standard of living, but recognizing that both counter-revolutionary pressures, the long history of class society, does require sort of an organizational structure that can mitigate sort of the different and varying realities of humanity to move towards that future that ultimately would be a classless society, which is communism.
Okay, so guess what, bitches? You want the clip? There's your clip. When they lie to you and tell you that socialism, it's different from communism. Socialism is the step towards communism, you retards. Think hard, double retards. when they lie to you. And you know the left is always going to lie to you. They love to lie to you. They're going to say things like this. Here's a post that I pulled my Instagram account on this one. Simon Donald, sorry for the curse word on the screen, guys. I'm a little salty. For F's sake, socialism is not communism, says Simon Donald. Capitalism, anybody can be rich. Communism, nobody can be rich. Socialism, anybody can be rich, but nobody should be poor. Well, you need to talk to the VP candidate from the Party of Socialism and Liberation, because there, Eugene Puryear is telling us all, he's telling us all the truth there. Why you gotta lie? Good morning, good morning. You slept the whole night through. Good morning to you. Nothing could be grander than to be from Louisiana. So it is the specific doctrine of Lenin and Stalin that the Democratic Socialists stand for. The historians who compiled the Black Book of Communism put the death toll of that doctrine in the 20th century at roughly 100 million human beings. So Donald Trump was absolutely correct. He was not engaging in hyperbole with that. His speech was dead on. It's exactly the right message. And the Democratic Socialists, they are choosing the label of Marxist. They are choosing the label of communists. This is the fact. Like, this is not something that they're some psycho is scrawling on a napkin or something. This is their adopted platform. The DSA's rebooted program, titled Workers Deserve More, calls for abolishing what they describe as the carceral forces of the capitalist state, meaning fire the police and empty the prisons. Right? And the harder factions, they push to abolish the Senate, the Supreme Court, the Electoral College, and even the presidency itself. Right? Now, the founders built every one of these institutions on purpose. The Senate, the courts, the Electoral College. Madison and Hamilton designed them in the Federalist Papers as brakes on exactly this kind of passionate majoritarianism that the Democratic Socialists or the communists want to push us towards. They want to stop a mob. They wanted to stop a mob from trampling a permanent minority. Now, the Commie Caucus doesn't want to repair the machine. They want to remove the brakes. And frankly, this party has no right to exist. And that is why I am calling for everyone who has not done so far to join us at the For Liberty Network and go to communistcontrolact.com and sign the petition to enforce the Communist Control Act. Put your name down. Sign the Declaration of Independence. Or you can't be the type of person to complain about everything. Nothing is good enough. Nobody's doing anything. And then somebody asks you to sign a petition that is completely aligned with what it is you're trying to do, and say, oh, and you don't sign it. And you won't even put your name down on a document to say, hey, we should enforce the law. And the law is the Communist Control Act. Now, I know what some of you are going to say. You're going to say, well, Austin, this isn't libertarian. You to outlaw a political party. First of all, there's no right to vote. Okay, there's not a right to vote. It's a privilege. Okay, and there's no privilege, and there's certainly no right to vote to overthrow the system of government that our founding fathers placed into our hands for safekeeping, and to replace our system of capitalism and free enterprise and individualism. Now, the Communist Party it is not a debating society. It is a domestic branch of an ideology that murdered 100 million people, and it openly wants to tear up our Constitution. Protecting free speech is not the same thing as handing a wrecking crew the keys to the building. Hubert Humphrey, a liberal Democrat, wrote this law. This used to be common sense in both parties. Okay, they're gonna, I know what you're gonna say. This law is unconstitutional. Federal court struck it down. Isn't this petition a dead letter? No. One federal court in Arizona questioned it back in the 1970s. The Supreme Court has never struck it down. Okay, and it's still on the books today. Now, if the left can dust off a 200-year statute when it suits them, we can enforce the law Eisenhower signed that has never been repealed. Let the courts weigh in. I would love that fight. Okay. Now, I know, well, you know what else they're going to say? Oh, this is McCarthyism with a fresh coat of paint. You know, McCarthy was a Republican. Eisenhower personally couldn't stand him. But the Communist Control Act was the Democrats' idea. Hubert Humphrey was tired about being lectured about being soft on communism. So he wrote the toughest anti-communist law in American history, and it got through the Senate 85-0. So if that's McCarthyism, take it up with the Democratic Party of 1954. Now, 27% is the share of Democrats who will even admit they're proud of this country, and that's Gallup's number, not mine. I'm not saying most Democrats are communists, but their party just handed 35 primaries to people who are, and their leadership is too scared to say no. All right. So if you want to know what the golden age is from all of this with the speech of Donald Trump, this is a country that is confident enough to love itself out loud again. Because it has become fashionable to sneer at this country, to treat the flag like an embarrassment and the anthem like it's an optional formality. That era is over. Okay. The stadiums, the World Cup stadiums are full. The border is being enforced. And the president stood at the foot of Mount Rushmore and called out the communists and reminded us what we're up against. Right? 250 years ago, our forefathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honors on this radical bet that a free people could govern themselves. And they were right. And we're not going to let the loudest 27% of the room talk us out of the greatest country in the history of the world. I'm not going to let it happen, and you shouldn't either.
Well, you mentioned Russia, you mentioned NATO, and we thank you for that because those are two topics of conversation that the president is going to be very much focused on this week when he heads to Turkey for the NATO summit. He'll be leaving later tonight. Are you interested in this at all? Tell us what piques your interest about the NATO summit and what you think we should be looking out for.
Yeah, Europe is finally paying for their own neighborhood, Carly. NATO is pledging roughly $80 billion in military aid to Ukraine this year. It's their border. It's their bill. It's not ours. This is the deal that we were always promised. This is what Trump campaigned on. You know, Dwight Eisenhower, the man who built NATO, called our troops there a temporary expedient back in 1951. This was supposed to be a stopgap while Europe rebuilt. Now, 75 years later, Trump is actually the first president with the nerve to actually collect on the bill. Yeah. Now, you guys, do you want to see more of that? You want to see Austin on Fox News more often? Here's what you got, because if you want to get your boomer grandpa or uncle or aunt or whatever, if you want to get the message of libertarian nationalism out to the people, then we got to support these appearances. Here's how we do it. Look at all those tabs. Here's how we do it. You go to this tweet right here. I'm going to copy the link and share it over in the Rumble link, comment for you guys. I need you to repost it, tag the Fox Friends First account, tag Todd Pyro, tag Carly Shimkus, tell them thank you for having me on the show. Tell them to have me back. You'd love to have me back. Make sure you tag them, repost it. Let them know that there's support for the Libertarian Nationalist Caucus inside the Republican Party. So do us a favor, guys. I'm going to drop that link over in Rumble right now. Just do me a favor. Head over there real quick and do me a solid and make sure that you tag Fox and Friends First. Tell them thanks for having me on. Tell them you'd love to see me come back, and hopefully they will book us out again so that we can take the fight to communists. What do you say? There you go. All right. Well, guys, that's a lot. When we come back, Jon Miltimore is going to join us to talk about how more than right about half of Gen Z is moving back into their parents' homes. We're going to talk about what that means for our economy. You don't want to miss that. We want to keep unlocking that bonus content. We've raised about $10 so far. If we raise $100 on the Wake Up America show, then you will unlock our mini documentary, which features a anime mini documentary about a hero of the American Revolution. If you guys want to see that, then head over to forlibertyshop.com this morning. That's the number 4, libertyshop.com. That's our show's store. When you go to forlibertyshop.com and you make a purchase during the live show, then that helps to unlock the bonus content. So it looks like Brad got the new shirt up there. Nice job, Brad. Anti-Socialist Social Club. You can find that on the brand new drops. When you go to forlibertyshop.com, you can scroll. I guess you can just click the new drops if you're on a desktop and or if you're on a mobile, just scroll down on the front page to see all the latest drops. but we got the anti-socialist social club in there. So thank you, Brad. Vegas trip's looking good. We're leaving this Wednesday. We got a lot of work to do there, guys. So we will be out. No show, no Wake Up America show on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So I'm going to go to a quick commercial break, guys. Oh, it looks like Amy J. Easley's flying out to Vegas tomorrow. Cannot wait for the trip. Cannot wait to see you in person, Amy. Vegas, baby. We'll play some blackjack together. All right, before you do, though, head on over to forlibertyshop.com. When we come back from the commercial break, we're going to talk to Jon Miltimore about why so many young people are moving back in with mom and dad. That's the Wake Up America show. This is the For Liberty Network. Be right back. Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up, he keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal. George Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that...
Shoot. Well, we're live. I didn't mean to push the button, but now we're live. Hey. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Petersen. Glad and thankful to have you here. I got to remember to get taken out of studio mode. Young people moving back in with their parents. Joining us live right now is Jon Miltimore from the American Institute of Economic Research. Let's talk econ. How you doing there, Jon? Good to see you, bud.
Hey, doing all right, AP. I'm moving a little bit slowly from the weekend. You know, a big celebration, several days worth, but back at it on Monday, like you.
Glad to have you, bud. Appreciate you very much. Let's talk a little bit about econ here. You saw that story I sent you from the Wall Street Journal about young people moving back in with their parents. A buddy of mine over in the chat, JJ, said many Asian cultures do allow older kids to stay with parents. So there's not quite the stigma they have here overseas. Do you think there should be a stigma? Good reason, bad reason, Jon? Your thoughts?
Good reason, bad reason, Jon? Your thoughts?
No, I don't think there needs to be a stigma. You know, I think there's, you know, all kinds of reasons people might want to move back in with their parents. You know, like I remember as a Seinfeld fan, when George Costanza moves back in, it's one of the funniest seasons, you know, in all of Seinfeld. But no, you don't need to stigmatize that. The trend's interesting. Like if you look into this, there's several reasons, but Americans today, they don't want roommates either. And that's kind of something, I'm not saying they're less inclined to have roommates. And that's part of this equation. But obviously the gorilla in the room is housing prices. In many ways, you look at today's housing market and it's less affordable than any housing market in history.
Now, you see that half of under 30s are living at home. I mean, the problem, of course, is that if you're a young man and you want to have like a dating life, or you want to be able to signal to a partner that you're capable of taking care of them, at least having your own apartment is kind of seen as something. I mean, how are you going to convince legion of young women to find a man attractive who lives at home? I mean, here's the thing. All these Hollywood movies, failure to launch with Matthew McConaughey and all that stuff, the culture doesn't look at a man who moves back home with his parents as making a sound financial decision. They see him as a loser, John. How do you overturn that?
They see him as a loser, John. How do you overturn that?
Yeah, I don't think you can. Like, when I'll go back to Seinfeld, when George says, short, bald, unemployed men who live with their parents don't approach strange, attractive women. Like there's something to that. Living with mom and dad will never be cool. You can't really sugarcoat that. And that's one thing, if people want to have roommates, that's, less stigmatized. I will say we should make it easier for people to do this. If you look, the market says Americans like living alone. And it spans all kinds of ages, especially 35 and older. Americans want to live alone. They just can't afford to. We make it really difficult for people to be able to afford housing alone. A lot of people, the median home price right now is about $420,000, and it's not easy for a lot of people to come up with the down payment and to take the steps to do that. I think if you look, zoning is a huge problem in this country. We could have a lot of housing could be made affordable overnight for millions and millions of more people if we just had more sensible zoning laws that let the market serve customers. But these cities are not interested in doing that.
I got to tell you, for most of human history, John, I think, and still today, multi-generational living was the norm, not the exception, like JJ was talking about earlier. I mean, maybe we're just returning to normal. I guess I wouldn't kick my kids out at 18 years old if they wanted to stay. I mean, I think I would probably place some rules for sure. There would have to be like some kind of contribution if you want to be, beyond 18 years old, if you want to stay home. I mean, is that the healthy way to look at it though? I mean, to try and go back to some kind of a multi-generation, like Great Depression style living, John?
Like Great Depression style living, John?
I'll say this. I don't look at this as progress. Like when you have, families that are having to move in with one another out of, economic necessity. That said, yeah, like I think these arrangements can work. I think especially younger, let's be honest. If you're 30 and you're moving back in with mom and dad, that is, I think, less desirable than if you're 22 and just out of college and trying to save for a few years. I think that makes a lot of sense. But you're right. You should have certain, parents should have rules around this. I think if my children decide to do that, they'll be paying some sort of rent, like they should. Like some of this is building the muscle memory to be independent, right? So even if they're just paying a little bit of rent and they're chipping in with groceries and things, all of that is kind of taking that step towards adulthood. If you look back, it's about 10 years ago, I think now, where adulting became, we started using it as a verb like that, like adulting, because people didn't know how to adult. Well, I think that's kind of a big problem if we have families, school systems where kids don't know how to do these basic things. So if you're doing that, if you're moving back in with mom and dad, getting them equipped to do their own adulting is one part of that.
If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm speaking to Jon Miltimore about how half of Gen Z is moving back into homes with their parents. We're talking a little bit about the stigma. We're talking about the economic realities of this. Here's what worries me. If you cannot afford a place of your own, you delay marriage, you delay kids. We're also sitting at a record low birth rate, John. So the housing squeeze is probably one of the hidden engines of the family formation collapse. I saw JJ again with another really good comment asking, do we need another housing collapse?
You know, I hope that doesn't happen. I do think we're going to be seeing a correction of some sorts here. Let's not forget, a lot of this goes back to COVID, when you had interest rates that swung all the way to zero, and you had everybody that locked in. And I'm one of these families, Austin. You locked in at this rate. Even if you wanted to move, it'd be very difficult because you have a great rate. And so I think if you look at this housing market is very cold because people are still clinging to those rates. They're not moving homes unless they take a new job, maybe in a new city, or it's the perfect, deal. And so, when you start to, there is a monetary component to this. I do think zoning is the gorilla in the room, but there is a monetary component to this. And there's no really, I think we're just going to see people wait that out to a degree. Interest rates, are, I guess, who knows where they go from here, but eventually we will see the housing market pick up. But I don't think I want or would welcome a collapse of that kind.
Well, what other options do these young people have other than to wait for and hope for something like that, John? Because under what circumstances could you actually see a gradual decline in housing prices, at least under the current political environment that we have right now? The NIMBYs aren't going anywhere. I mean, maybe we're lucky that they're distracted by the data centers that are getting built out right now. But the fact is that there's no political appetite on the left or the right for building new housing, John. I don't see it anywhere. Not even, especially not on the local level where it really counts. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm in the reddest district in the reddest county here in Missouri. And the number one thing that is on the top of people's agenda when I go to the local Republican county club meetings, stop the housing building. Stop building housing, John. And these are Republicans, right? They'll say free markets, conservatives, limited government. But the first thing we got to do is stop the housing. And then number two, stop the data centers. How do you fight that?
And then number two, stop the data centers. How do you fight that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you can fight that too much. I will say this isn't uniform everywhere. If you look, there are certain parts of the country that are growing very rapidly, where housing is coming to the market, where you can get more affordable housing. Like, I'll tell you, my community, I live in Carver County, Minnesota. We have housing going up all over the place, and it's a very nice community, and prices are good. Like, if you're looking, to rent, if you're looking to buy, I think you're going to get a much better deal than you will in many parts of the country. That said, it's still expensive, and I think we need to be realistic about this. You're right, the NIMBYs aren't going away, but people can be prudent in their 20s, and this is to go back to what we were just talking about: living with mom and dad for a few years, saving. Building that down payment, and just biding your time, waiting out, the housing market, because it is, by historical standards, more unaffordable than ever. And I'm not just talking nominal prices. If you look at the ratio of housing prices related to per capita income, for example, it's the most unaffordable ever. So I think, just being patient, but in that time, building not a nest egg, but building some capital. So when the moment does strike, when the housing market does correct, you're in a good place to get down that a good down payment and maybe get a loan that's not going to break the bank. And there is that old debate: is it better to rent or buy? I mean, you can find people on both sides that make compelling arguments. I think it's pretty close, but let's be honest. It depends when you're making that purchase. Mm-hmm. If you buy your home in the right point in the housing market, it's going to mean hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference. Mm-hmm. And we, are probably going to be reaching a point where it's going to be a better buyer's market in the near future.
Now, because the people who watch this show have unprecedented IQ levels, I get my best ideas from them. Mongoose87 says, get the illegals out and it will decrease demand side pressure. John, would we see housing prices decline under a mass deportation agenda?
Mass deportation.
Those solutions to me, they don't hold a lot of water. But I mean, sure, in the very basic sense, if you want to say, if you have 16 million fewer people, yeah, that's going to change the housing economics. But that's really not the idea that immigrants are a culprit here. To me, is just a silly idea. I think we have much better. The economics are pretty clear on this. Make it easier for people to construct housing. Let markets operate.
Oh, you think that there's more political appetite to build new housing than there is to deport illegal immigrants, John? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not a political scientist. I couldn't tell you what the polling on that is. I would feel bad for my country if we look at the better solution, the more prudent solution is to deport 16 million people versus simply allow the market to function.
Well, deporting all 16 million people maybe might be a bit of a bridge too far for some people, but in terms of what's actually politically feasible, you think that it's more politically feasible to get people to want to have these housing duplexes and things built in their neighborhoods than to deport illegal aliens? Come on, John.
I think it's certainly, more palatable to people in some areas, right?
In Minnesota, maybe in Minnesota where you live, John.
Truly, I think you would find. I don't think you'd find much appetite in my state, for example, to say, let's start, deporting all the illegal immigrants. I think selling housing expansion is a much more palatable political solution. Maybe other parts of the country that's not the case. But there's a lot of things I complain about my state. I will say I'm impressed. It's still growing. Like there's still a hunger for entrepreneurship, for housing expansion, despite the best efforts of some of the people in St. Paul.
Did you see that your governor pardoned a migrant an illegal who raped a child?
I did not.
Oh my God, it's terrible. Look it up. Tim Walz. It's a guy from Laos who had been here for like 20 years, and they were going to deport him because of his child sexual assault charge. And Tampon Tim pardoned him so that they couldn't deport him. And this is actually the second guy that they've done this for. Yeah, I can't believe that a guy like you can want to stay in a place like Minnesota forever, John, with that kind of governorship. And it doesn't look like it's getting better.
No, I'll be honest. We talk about it. We talk about can we stay here? And a lot of it comes right down to St. Paul. And you will not hear me utter a word of defense for the current governor there. I think he is an abomination as a politician. I think he's a huckster. He's when Hayek talk about the worst rising to the top in politics, like you could put a big picture of Tim Walz up there. I don't know how he managed to be elected. It's funny, he was a very unpopular House in Congress. He ran for governor because he was so unpopular in his district, yet somehow he pulled it off and won. And now I guess he's been 3 terms now, or it's just really mind. More reason, like politics is a really lousy way sometimes to. And this isn't just Minnesota. Look, you can find these races, Austin. Would you want to vote for either of the people, say, for in Texas for U.S. Senate? You can find all these examples where people have very bad choices, and our politics is failing on a number of levels. That's a whole nother topic, though.
Friedrich Hayek, you quoted, you mentioned him here. Zoran Mamdani actually quoted Hayek without naming him in a refutation of him. Take a listen to this.
Throughout this process, I've been reminded of the words of the Austrian economist Friedrich Hayek. If socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists. If these past months have shown us anything, it is that socialists not only understand economics just as well as the capitalists who came before, but that we can solve their years of mismanagement through an embrace of our principles.
Wow, that's right there. It's quoting Hayek by name. I didn't know he actually called him by name, but yeah. So your response to Zoran Mamdani?
Oh, he's gaslighting us. I mean, that's what he's doing. I actually included that clip. I have a column going out at the Washington Examiner this week. It looks at Mamdani's rent freeze. And what's interesting is they passed that only by ignoring all of the housing boards, their own data. Their own data shows that the costs associated with these buildings is through the roof, and it's about 3 times that of inflation. And they decided they didn't care. They're going to freeze rents anyway, even though landlords are not making money. And you had a board member, a housing board member that just resigned over it. She said this was a farce. This was pure theater. And that's what we're seeing. Mamdani can say, we know, economics just as well as the capitalists. We're going to see the results of these policies in New York soon. And it's going to be a disaster for the people of New York. You cannot keep people, these landlords need to make money too, and they're not. And what they're going to do is find ways to just move out. And you're going to see a massive, the problem, here's the thing. New York is already experiencing an exodus of population, right? And I think we're going to see that speed up, and there's not going to be enough housing for people. This will not fix the problems. If you look, New York has been running rent control for years already. They just call it a slightly different, they don't say rent control, but that's what they're doing, and that's what has created the problems there.
John, you recently wrote about finding fulfillment in an age of mass plenty, and that's kind of the great paradox. This generation has more gadgets, more entertainment, cheaper stuff than any humans in history, but they can't actually afford the things that make a life, like homes. So how do we square all this abundance with all that unhappiness?
Yeah, I think part of this, I don't want to go too philosophical in this, but it was a quote from a character in a story, a Pulitzer Prize-winning story. Finding joy in the little things in life, I think, is one of the most important things you can do. And you
don't have a home. You don't have a home, but
make you unhappy.
You need all they need is chicken soup for the soul.
All they need is chicken soup for the soul.
Hey, even you can find people. You can find billionaires that will tell you they were never happier when they were living with their roommates trying to make it right. This isn't. I look back at my own years. Living in a house with 8 other guys. We were paying basement rent, but you're living on top of each other. Those were not bad memories for me. I enjoy all of that. Wherever you are, find the joy in that. Again, this sounds a little Pollyannish, but it's true. Find joy in the little things in life. Life has a way of working itself out if you keep the right attitude and keep working, and that's what people should be doing.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
I don't use that phrase. I think, come on, let's be honest here. This is a country still. You have people all over the world that are clamoring to get here because it offers so much. And America is very much still the land of opportunity. It's funny that I have to preach this to conservatives, I think, more than leftists these days. And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why there's so much discontent among conservatives.
It's because they can't afford a house. It's because they can't afford a house, John.
Well, I think if you look, housing affordability has been an issue in this country a long time. Today's market is difficult, but if you're going to look at that and you want to, start stomping your feet and crying about it, you're probably, that won't be much of a solution for you. Like I said, the advice I gave, I think, is pretty good. If you're patient, if you save, you're going to find yourself in a few years in a really good position to own a home. And maybe you can do it in today's, people are still buying homes all the time. It's a little more difficult today. There's some barriers. Let's go back though. This isn't new. You can go back to the early 80s. I know people today that their first home, they bought it at a 20% interest rate. There's always been challenges to home ownership in this country. This isn't a completely new phenomenon.
Jon Miltimore from AIER. Anything else our listeners should know before we let you go? No, like always, check out thedailyeconomy.org, and you can find me on Substack, The Take by Jon Miltimore. That's Jon Miltimore. Thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate you.
Hey, good being with you, Austin.
おはよう同胞たちよ。明日、我が国は独立宣言から250年の節目を迎え、そして今、このアメリカを見て、我々は何を思うだろうか。我々が見るのは、矛盾に満ちる国の中の矛盾に満ちる都市だ。史上最も豊かな国。だが、子供たちが窮福のまま眠りにつく一方で、世界初の億万長者はさらなる富に飢えている。我々が見るのは、工場の現場で汗を流す者たちが築き上げた計り知れない富を持つ国だ。だがその富の多くをほんの一握りの者たちの手に委ねてしまった国でもある。一国心とは正義のための反対の声すべてだ。 灼熱の太陽の下で導かれた行進の全てだ。時代に10年先まんじ掲げられた公義の全てだ。我が国が築かれたあの理想、それはいかなる政権をも超えて生き延びるほど強い。だがそれは我々が手を伸ばしてこそだ。神のご加護をアメリカに、神のご加護をニューヨークに、良い独立記念地を。
That's Commie Mamdani there. Rare Camellia says, he's not wrong. My older daughter has saved nearly $20K at a retail job, and her boyfriend's the same. They're not considering buying. It's not saying it's easy, but it can be done. Your Amalek says, how about Republicans address the voters' concerns and break up monopolies and crack down on Wall Street fraud, deport illegals, let the billionaires in line, and end the Iran conflict, cut off Israeli funding, etc. InJam says, according to John Stossel, young people have it easy. And who else? There was another really good one there. Mongoose said, you have no hope for getting a house, no hope for starting a family, but look at the bright side. Funny. That's funny. Thank you, Andy Opperman. Says, happiness can often dissipate with achievement, and you suddenly realize the journey has got to be the goal. Thank you very much. We appreciate you guys for tuning in this morning. Thank you for your generous contributions to the Wake Up America show and the 4 Liberty Network. Check out all of the latest new product drops over at 4libertyshop.com. We've got the new Anti-Socialist Social Club shirt over there at 4libertyshop.com. I think you'll enjoy it very much.
情報の流れはかつてない速度で加速している。世界は我々が考えるよりも早く変化している。では聞こう。あなたはここからニュースを得ている。サイオップアニメニュースネットワーク。
こんばんは。ニューヨークからお伝えします。
Wake Up America show. こんばんは。ありがとうございます。Glad and thankful to have friends like Camellia here. She'll be on the show with us tomorrow at 8 a.m. Central Time on the Wake Up America show. Guys, click that like button if you haven't. It's a totally free way to support the Wake Up America show. You can click the follow button too if today is the first time that you've ever watched the Wake Up America show. We'd love to have you come back and join us every Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. My next guest is going to be economist Dan Mitchell, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about the fight on the right about Milton Friedman versus Alexander Hamilton. We're going to talk about that Vance interview with Michael Knowles, and I've pulled a couple of articles. JD Vance hates Milton Friedman, written by JD Tuchili. We're going to have Dan Mitchell on the Wake Up America show. We're going to talk about whether or not the Republican Party is more Alexander Hamilton or whether it is still the party of Milton Friedman. We'll talk about all of that, of course, when we get back on the Wake Up America show. But before we go, Amy J. Easy says, okay, what's with these cartoons? I just really like the cartoons. I just think they're good. Relevant to the news cycle. I don't know. And am I the only person who kind of enjoys a little bit of like anime cartoons? No? Nobody. Am I the only one? Okay. No more cartoons if you guys are like done with them. Okay. I don't know. I just like the anime cartoons about what's happening here in America. Anyways, guys, during the break, the commercial break, head on over to 4libertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. Check out our newest merch drop, the Anti-Socialist Social Club, as seen being worn by our friend Spencer Pratt. We just dropped this one this morning. The Anti-Socialist Social Club shirt is available at 4libertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. Comes in black, dark gray heather, maroon, and navy. I think I'm going to get the navy one. Looks really nice. Anti-Socialist Social Club, only at 4libertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. When we get back, the free market rebuttal. Dan Mitchell, economist from the Cato Institute, will be here. This is the Wake Up America show, and you're watching the 4 Liberty Network. Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com.
In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up, he keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal.
'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership.
Welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. I'm your host, Austin Petersen. This is the Wake Up America show. It's time to rise and freedom. Glad and thankful to have you here. If you haven't already, please do click the like button. And if you've been enjoying today's content, we'd love to have you be a regular guest. Click the follow button come back and join us. The show is 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Central, although we will be out this week, Wednesday through Friday, because we're going to be at Freedom Fest. So catch up on some of our clips there by following me over on X at AP4Liberty. Well, the vice president just declared that the Republican Party is now more Alexander Hamilton than Milton Friedman. What does that mean? Well, it means more tariffs, more industrial policy, government meddling in the economy, less free markets. So is that the future of the right or a betrayal of the ideas that made America rich? We're going to put that question to one of the most hardcore free market economists in the country. Dan Mitchell is joining us live here on the Wake Up America show, and it's nice to see him again. Good morning, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning, Austin. Glad to be with you.
So last week, Michael Knowles interviewed Vice President JD Vance. He sent something that kind of sent a jolt through every free market right-winger in the country. He said, quote, that economic policy on the right is now much more Alexander Hamilton than Milton Friedman. And he said specifically that the economy is merely a tool to serve the dignity of the human person. How do you react to that?
I guess I have a couple of concerns about what the vice president said. First of all, isn't freedom part of the dignity of an individual? So at some fundamental moral level, I think what was said is just misguided. The notion that I should be free to truck, barter, and exchange with other people without excessive government intervention, taxes, the government putting its thumb on the scale, with protectionism, industrial policy. I think dignity, in part, is just living your life free from the government ordering you what to do and interfering with your choices. Now, having said that, I want to say something not supportive of what the vice president said, but semi-agreement. He made the point that in a moral society, capitalism works better. And I think that's true. But I think that's true for any economic system. If you had a very moral people who followed rules, like say in Scandinavia, socialism in Scandinavia, or at least a welfare state in Scandinavia, works better than a welfare state in Greece. So the idea that somehow your society will be more functional and more prosperous with an honest and moral people, I agree with that. But that doesn't in any way suggest that we'll get better economic growth or more morality with protectionism, with industrial policy, with corporatism. So the idea that morality is good in no way should lead people to therefore decide that big government is good.
Right. Well, I mean, look at China. The evil communist government of China has proved that even a society plagued by the evils of communism and socialism, if they free up their markets even a little bit, it can result in tremendous amounts of prosperity. So you don't even have to be a good people in order to enjoy the benefits of capitalism. Cuba is now talking about doing the same thing, liberalizing their economy. Of course, they're terrified that Trump's going to invade, and there's good reason for that. But I think you're right to give JD Vance some credit here, because I do think that people like ourselves, the hardcore free market ideologue types, we do sort of try and default back to the sort of numbers on a spreadsheet capitalism and miss the humanizing stories of the families and the towns that get hollowed out when these factories leave. So there is something of, I don't know, some people would call it autistic in a pejorative way, but there does seem to be a lack of an ability for people who are on our side to communicate how capitalism and freedom do lead to human dignity, as you've sort of described. Would you agree?
I agree 100%. And let me give you an example that I've used in some of my work. There is no question that creative destruction is what makes us richer as a society. However, there is a destruction side of creative destruction. If you worked in a typewriter factory when the personal computer came upon the scene, you may have lost your job. If your job, or if you were an entrepreneur and you ran a candle factory and all of a sudden the electric light bulb was invented, you may have lost your fortune. So there's all sorts of sad human stories that result from the creative destruction that makes all of us much richer. And it would take a bad person not to feel sympathy for people who, for no fault of their own, lost their jobs or lost their fortunes because creative destruction rearranged the economic circumstances. So yes, when I look at people in a factory town that lost their jobs, I feel genuine sympathy for them. However, in no way does that lead me to think, well, therefore, we should let a bunch of politicians in Washington control the economy, because in the long run, the net effect of giving government more power and more control will be to cause more factories to shut down. It will be to stop the progress that makes all of us richer in the long run. One of the lines I use sometimes in my speeches, Austin, is that the children and grandchildren of candle makers and typewriter repairmen, they're better off because we allowed that creative destruction to occur. But yes, a dynamic economy does hurt people sometimes. But in the long run, it's also what makes all of us much better off. And we have to, when I see these sad stories about a factory shutting down, my immediate thought is we need to have more economic freedom so that there's great opportunities for people to find new jobs and not to have the government sort of, trap people in a web of dependency.
Dan, really good insights. I see you're wearing your Javier Milei 2027 shirt. Okay, well done there. Big fans, obviously. And one of the things that I think was kind of an important revelation that Javier Milei has handed to the libertarians in the United States, if they'll listen, is that not everything is a war of economics. There is also a culture war. A lot of libertarians eschew the culture wars. They always fall back to the economic arguments. They try and see us as everybody as homo economicus. And Milei had said specifically that we should fight the culture wars. And he said you should not give shit leftards an inch. And one of my commenters over here, he's kind of echoing the criticisms, saying that graph go up conservatism ignores the hollowing out of American culture. And I think what he's referring to specifically, Dan, is that during the Biden years, we invited millions of people to the United States who do not respect the American culture of free enterprise and of free market capitalism. So is mass immigration something that people who are free market libertarians, is this something we should be re-examining as whether or not it's actually a libertarian principle at all?
Well, I'm an economist. So when you talk about graph go up conservatism or libertarianism, I guess I have to plead guilty. I do sort of look at the world that way, but that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the fact that culture matters. One of the things that I've evolved on over the last 15, 20 years is that I do think that Western Enlightenment values are critically important. And this gets back to the very beginning of our discussion, that a moral people are better for a free market system. So yes, I want people who just naturally and instinctively understand and appreciate human freedom, individual rights, press freedoms, religious liberty, but also strong families, the importance of community. I mean, we are not homo economicus. I mean, what gives all of our lives happiness and value, when we're on our deathbed, hopefully decades and decades from now, Austin, we're not going to look back and say, boy, my 401k was, up here or something like that. We're going to think back about our kids, our grandkids, the friends that we made, the happy experiences we had. But here's the thing that gets me. All those good things in life that we'll remember as we're passing away, those are things that are made more possible in a free society. So in my mind, there should be a natural alliance, and I think we saw this during the Reagan years, a natural alliance between the economic libertarians and the social conservatives. Mm-hmm. And yes, getting back to your question, if that means that we want to make sure that the people we're letting into the country are more naturally sympathetic to those Western Enlightenment values, I think that's a reasonable concern to have. And I have evolved on that issue, in part just for political reasons. I want the Republican Party to nominate Ronald Reagan's in the future, not Donald Trump's. And if that means not having an open borders position, I'll throw my I'll throw my libertarian friends overboard who are very open borders, simply because sometimes you have to be politically realistic.
Well, not only politically realistic, but I just think that on a question of strategy, that libertarianism in the United States lacks an important component. Hey, I'm a martial arts instructor. I teach traditional Japanese karate, and one of the important lessons that you learn over the decades, if you're not like a Kool-Aid drinker or somebody who does a McDojo kind of thing, right, rather like fake cheese stuff, is that Japanese karate, as in its current form in the United States, is incomplete because it doesn't have grappling, it doesn't have throwing. And what I have realized is that American libertarianism is sort of like that in a way, in that it doesn't contain an important function to actually function in self-defense. It has a philosophy of non-aggression, but when you look around at the environment that we're placed in, we are constantly having our NAP violated. We are constantly having violations and transgressions committed against us. And so one has to wonder just what is an appropriate response to all of the NAP violations that are constantly going on, not just by government, but by private actors, aggressions, microaggressions, Dan. And so I have to ask myself, like, at what point, do we just say that the non-aggression principle is not a bedrock of libertarianism, because it doesn't actually give us the means, the tools, the means that are necessary for self-defense. In other words, what I'm saying here, Dan, which is will drive our libertarian friends bonkers and make all of their heads explode, is that perhaps you might have to do some non-libertarian things to get libertarian ends. So I guess my question in all of this is that, do the libertarian ends justify the non-libertarian means?
I'm an economist, so I'm probably not going to be
keep backing up on that one. Okay.
How many libertarian angels can dance on the head of a pin? I'm not going to be as well versed in that as you are and others are. But I agree, we have to be practical. Do I think Ronald Reagan was perfect? No, of course not. But do I think in my lifetime he was the one president who moved the needle in the right direction? Yes. If I lived in Argentina, would I think Javier Milei is perfect? Probably not. But you know what? In my lifetime, he's moving the needle in the right direction, and that's a very, very rare thing. So as we're sort of contemplating how we can advance our ideas, if we think about how to advance human liberty to get more economic growth, whatever type of libertarian you are, we want more freedom. And the freedom that we want people to have will generate more prosperity. Now, around the edges, are we going to disagree? Of course, you get 5 libertarians in a room, they're all going to wind up hating each other. Well, who's a Randy and who's an Austrian, who's an anarcho-capitalist? Yeah, libertarians love to argue. I'm not smart enough to get all those debates right.
Well,
what I want to focus
Dan,
on is limiting the growth and size of government.
Well, let's talk about the contributions of Milton Friedman. Before we throw Milton Friedman overboard and just say, yeah, let's go with what Alexander Hamilton wanted, remind us what he actually delivered. School choice, ending the draft, taming inflation, free trade that pulled 1 billion people out of poverty. What are we throwing away if we throw away the legacy of Friedman?
Well, first of all, I don't think, other than a few of these national conservative types, I think the legacy of Milton Friedman is incredibly strong. What he basically said throughout his life, we see around the world, Milton Friedman was 99.99% correct. Friedman, Hayek, the classical liberals were exactly correct about the ills and the dangers of government getting bigger, taking over more power. And what I want to say to my social conservative friends, if you value strong families, strong neighborhoods, strong communities, you don't want to give government more power. First of all, even if you think Trump is somehow okay wielding a lot of power over the economy, it's just going to be a matter of time before you get an AOC or some other left-winger. And once government has that power and once the left gets in charge, that power will be used in ways that social conservatives will hate. And so my argument to them is, let's agree to limit the size of government, leave more room for civil society, because civil society is what gives us those things that social conservatives value. And by the way, the things that most most libertarians are very bourgeois. They live normal lives with their families and their communities and their neighbors. It's not like libertarianism means you want everyone to sit around smoking pot all day. It means that simply get government out of the way so people can be free to live normal lives, and in a few cases to live abnormal lives. But as long as you're following that non-aggression principle, okay, if somebody wants to go smoke pot all day and be that kind of libertarian, God bless them, as long as they're not doing something to hurt me.
Okay, well, they do need to they do need to stop smoking it in public, because I gotta say, like, as a pretty hardcore libertarian on the drug issue, when I take my kids to public parks, I shouldn't have to worry that my 2-year-old daughter is going to get a contact high, because Missouri has legalized marijuana, but the problem is Dan, is that too many people who are libertarian drug legalizers, they love to talk about liberty, but they never talk about responsibility. And there has to be a responsibility on the enforcement side of some of these policies, because the fact is that now that we've legalized drugs in all these states, some of these states want to take it back. Some of these states, because of the way that people are actually behaving, not in some libertarian theory guidebook or handbook or a book by Murray Rothbard, the way people actually behave is to go out in public on the street and blow it in the faces of little children. And I'm sorry, but Dan, I can't even agree with that or tolerate that. Or there have to, like, this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that libertarianism is missing a very important part of our ideology, which is the responsibility for the enforcement of the laws which are justifiable and moral laws. I mean, too much of what I think people confuse libertarianism with is anarchy. And yes, I include anarcho-capitalism in that, because, again, without that responsibility part of the equation, you don't have a right to smoke marijuana in public and blow it in people's faces because they don't consent to have that, which creates a whole different problem of the question of things like, carburetors in mandates on carburetors in cars that put out deadly emissions. And even Milton Friedman had to deal with that one. So, I mean, we're missing a huge part of what freedom really means, Dan. And I think that the problem is that we have talk about the angelic libertarians dancing on a pin, that nobody is talking about the responsibility part of that equation. And the minute that you talk about actually enforcing a law, even if you get a majority of the libertarians to agree, oh yeah, well, it should be illegal for you to smoke in public and to blow marijuana smoke in public at the public park like I have down where we live, then as soon as you start talking about enforcing that law, status, bootlicker, authoritarian, so at some point, Dan, I just have to truck with the anti-drug people, because at least the anti-drug people want to prevent people from doing these kinds of things out in public, this libertine attitude that I think libertarians, really, they're falling on the side of the left. Many of them are de facto leftists, Dan, and that's why many of them are more than comfortable lining up behind, the Democratic candidates, whether it's because of the open borders positions. You see Sheikha Sood Dalmia, who used to be like the reason Cato person, now out there excoriating libertarians, is willing to pack the Supreme Court because she doesn't like what Donald Trump is doing. This kind of authoritarian leftism that so many libertarians have, Dan, I'm sorry, but I'm like you. I'm throwing them all over the side of the boat, and I'm happy with my Donald Trump as long as Javier Milei and libertarian nationalists find a place in the Republican Party. I'm just willing to, as long as people aren't blowing marijuana smoke in my daughter's face at the public park, then I'm going to have to be fine with Republicans politically. Dan, can you smoke what I'm rolling up for you, or what do you have to say to that?
Well, of course, the libertarian answer to this controversy is let the private sector run the parks, and if the local board running your park where you take your 2-year-old daughter decides to have a rule, as they have the right to have under private property rights, they can say, okay, this is a park where people can smoke pot publicly. Other parks will say, no, there's no public pot smoking. But yes, your fundamental point I agree with. I don't worry that much about whether or not there are laws against, say, having a bunch of vagrants, hanging out on a street corner and defecating on the sidewalk. It's a violation of their human rights to say they can't do that. But again, we want to live normal lives. And so that's why I tend to be a libertarian who agrees that there can be an alliance with social conservatives because 99% of the population wants normalcy, politeness, what you call the responsibility side. This is just part of being a good moral society, and a good moral society has a lot of freedom, but as you say, there's a responsibility not to be a jerk.
Yeah, well, we don't want to live like the third world. We don't want to live like India. People don't want pooping on the streets in their societies. I don't think that we should have to tolerate that. And I just can't understand a libertarianism that wants to live in cities where there's open air drug markets. The government is funding needle programs and allowing these people to live on the streets and defecate on the streets. I mean, I just don't think that there's any way that we could sell a version of libertarianism to the American people that trucks with that kind of behavior, because nobody wants, if people wanted to live in India and live in conditions like they do in India where they're shitting on the streets, Dan, they would go live in India. But people they want to have law and order. They want to have freedom, but they want to have that within reasonable limits so that and the problem it feels like is that the way freedom is being described by people who advocate for our ideas is to not restrain or restrict any of the indecent or clearly immoral behaviors that people want to engage in the public sphere, and like the rest of us have to tolerate it. And I don't know, you don't want to live in those kinds of societies, Dan. I mean, I'm sure you probably don't live in a neighborhood where people are doing that. But when you got to go to when the voters are in these districts, people like Spencer Pratt are running on these issues. Sadly, he can't even win on issues like that in Los Angeles. But those issues clearly resonate with the American people. They're not siding with the Cato Institute on these things. Your side.
But let me push back on you a little bit.
Go ahead.
I favor maximum decentralization. So I'm a very bourgeois libertarian. I live in the suburbs. I live a life that could be considered, Dan Mitchell's a social conservative, just because, I don't like gambling. I hardly ever drink. I've never done drugs. So yeah, I'm a very boring kind of libertarian. But if I'm a lifestyle libertarian and I want to live in a city with a lot of what personally I think of as chaos, but some people might enjoy that more, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let people locally decide, okay, I want an anything goes approach to my street and my neighborhood and my little community. It might not be what I like, and I'll go move out to the suburbs and I'll lead what a lifestyle libertarian might consider to be, Dan Mitchell's the most boring square person in the world. But that's why decentralization is part of what should be in a free country.
Yeah, I guess I understand it, but I think that in theory it sounds good, Dan, but unfortunately what happens is that those policies from those inner cities, they bleed out into the suburbs and they start moving their way out. And then all of a sudden the population that's living in those suburbs gets displaced because rather than be called a racist and speak up about what's happening in their communities, they just move to other communities. It's a pretty common theme that you see, especially in a lot of your economic models. I want to give you the opportunity to share anything that you like with our audience. Dan, tell us about what you're working on these days and where can people follow you online?
Well, I write a column every single day at International Liberty, which the site is simply danieljmitchell.wordpress.com. But just go online and search for Dan Mitchell blog. It's almost always the first thing that comes up. I, of course, continue to work on standard fiscal policy issues, saving America from becoming Italy in the future. But what really motivates me lately is Javier Milei, I think, is a great role model. He's giving the world a template for how you pull a country out of economic crisis. We're stumbling toward that crisis.
Looks like we lost Dan there. Well,
a lot of the Western world is linked toward that crisis. Javier doing substantial expand freedom and as libertarian, not left libertarian approach. So he's an example of many of the issues we've talked about on this episode.
Daniel J. Mitchell, one of the preeminent economists in the United States. Make sure you follow him over at Daniel J. Mitchell. Hey, Daniel, thank you for your time. We appreciate your input and feedback, and it was a really, really good conversation. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Austin.
Thank you very much. Make sure you give Dan a follow. It's also a good follow over on X. You find his handle. Now it's time to say goodbye to all our family. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the Wake Up America show. Today's already been an exciting morning. It's already been a whole day, right? I was on Fox News earlier this morning, and I was up at like 3 a.m. It's been going great. Remember, no Wake Up America show on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday because I will be out in Las Vegas. So make sure that you come back tomorrow because that'll be the last episode for this week. Appreciate all you guys do for us. Make sure you hit up the Grift Shop. Go to forlibertyshop.com. Check out our new t-shirt, the Anti-Socialist Social Club t-shirt over at forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4, forlibertyshop.com. Head on over to forlibertyshop.com this morning. Get your Anti-Socialist t-shirt. And while you're at it, guys, grab a box of delicious Founding Flavors coffee. The Franklin's Electric Elixir is a delicious coffee available exclusively at forlibertyshop.com. Electrifying. We'll see you guys right back again here tomorrow on the Wake Up America show and the For Liberty Network. Bye, guys. Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again.